free.
New York Republican Congressman Anthony D'Esposito denying a New York Times report accusing him of possible House ethic rules violations. His fiance's daughter and a woman with whom he was allegedly having an affair were allegedly on his payroll. House Speaker Mike Johnson said the allegations are a distraction.
I'm aware that there's this issue out there in these allegations. I haven't had a chance yet to speak with Anthony.
The report says D'Esposito hired the pair in 2023, paying them nearly $30,000 each. An honor for the ages for country music legend Johnny Cash.
Each state gets to place 2 statues in the Capitol. And to replace an earlier lesser-known figure, Arkansas has now sent a bronze sculpture of the Man in Black, eyes cast downward, a guitar on his back. The Air Force Band played Walk the Line, and Johnny Cash's daughter Roseanne spoke.
Words cannot come close to expressing our pride to see my dad accorded such a singular privilege.
It's the first time a musician statue has been placed in the Capitol's collection. Stephen Portnoy, ABC News, Washington.
More than 10,000 books were removed from school library shelves during the past school year. The free expression advocacy group PEN America says this marks a nearly triple-fold increase from the previous year. About 8,000 of the books removed were just in Florida and Iowa. Both states have laws restricting content related to sex, gender, and LGBTQ issues. Daria Albinger, ABC News.
Hi, I'm Angie Hicks, co-founder of Angie. When you use Angie for your home projects, you know all your jobs will be done well. Roof repair? Done well. Kitchen sink install? Done well. Deck upgrades? Done well. Electrical upgrade? Done well. Angie's been connecting homeowners with skilled pros for nearly 30 years, so we know the difference between done and done well. Hire high-quality, certified pros at Angie.com.
News Talk 610 AM and 102.1 FM. KBNU.
I'm Gil Walter, KBNU News. News is brought to you by Cardall's Insulation. Firefighters put out a garage fire near 830 West, 1100 South in Logan Monday afternoon. The fire was reported around 3 p.m. One person was checked by medical personnel at the scene. No one sustained serious injuries. When emergency personnel arrived, black smoke was coming from the door to the garage and burn marks were visible on the side of the house. The fire was quickly contained. Firefighters cut open the garage door, letting smoke and water pour out. The fire was contained to the garage and did not spread to the rest of the house. The cause of the fire is still under investigation. Last year, Mark Anderson of Anderson Seed and Garden and organizer of the first Center Street Giant Pumpkin Festival was grateful for all the help he received to get the festival going.
And just so many people stepped up to help us put that on for the first year, and especially the Giant Pumpkin Growers Association of Utah. We can't do the Way Off without them because they're the ones that grow the pumpkins.
Sure.
You know, and so many things had to fall together, come together last year for it to work out. And we anticipated maybe 5,000 or 8,000 people, 10. If we thought it'd be great if we got 10,000 people, and our estimates were about 15 to 17,000 people showed up last year.
Last year's winning pumpkin weighed in at 1,787 pounds. We'll see if that record can be beat as they are ready to do it again this year. The second annual Center Street Giant Pumpkin Festival is this Saturday on West Center Street in downtown Logan. On a recent KBNU for the People program, Anderson said they will start weighing pumpkins at 11 a.m.
We've got kids categories and the Pumpkin Growers Commonwealth, which is international.
Wow.
They have categories of different vegetables too. So we'll actually be weighing giant tomatoes, for the biggest tomato in Utah, and they've got a giant squash category, and they've got a giant watermelon category. So we'll start with the kids categories, and if you've got kids that have grown some giant pumpkins, they can enter those for free.
He said the big weigh-off for giant pumpkins will probably start around 12:30 p.m. or so, and by 4 or 4:30, they will hopefully be weighing the biggest 3 pumpkins of the event, and then they will crown the Center Street Giant.
During the day, I think this year we've got 112 vendor booths and food trucks. So there's going to be food and activities and music. We've got music every like every 2 hours at the plaza, at the Lob Plaza. There'll be a different music group performing at 11, at 1, and at 3 o'clock. And then at 5 o'clock, we've got our main event, and we'll have the Lonely Hearts Club Band, which is a Beatles cover band. They'll be playing from 5 o'clock until dark.
Other events include a pie-eating contest and free movies at the Utah Theater featuring It's the Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown, showing throughout the afternoon beginning at 12:30 p.m. Get more information at centerstreetgiant.com. And a project that will return water to the Bear River watershed and eventually to the Great Salt Lake will begin next week in Logan, just south of Utah State University. The Utah Conservation Corps and AmeriCorps program, housed in USU Center for Community Engagement, has secured $28,031 through the Utah Division of Forestry, Fire, and State Lands Community Forestry Partnership Grant. Included in the project is removal of invasive species while reducing fuel loads on the Wuthrich property, 32 acres owned by Utah State University near the mouth of Logan Canyon. Project work begins in October with 2 5-person crews working with USU forester Dane Gillenskog, treating invasive Russian olive, Siberian elm, and several dead and hazardous trees while making way for native species. Experts say a potential savings of 4,500 gallons of water a day is possible just from the removal of a Russian olive alone. KBNU weather brought to you by Roof Rescue, dedicated to keeping your home safe and dry. Give them a call, 435-999-4268, or see roofrescueusa.com. Mostly clear tonight, low in the low 50s, sunny, warm around 85 tomorrow. Get more news at cachevalleydaily.com.
Hey, radio listeners, before we get you back to the music, let me tell you real quick about what I did that is saving me a lot of money. I got new insulation in my house. That's right. Now, I know you're thinking, boring, but have you seen the reports lately about how better insulation can save a ton of money on your energy bills? I can tell you it made a huge difference in my home. I mean, not only does the temperature stay perfect, but my energy bill is definitely down. Do what I did. Call Cardall's Insulation, 755-5012. That's 755-5012 for Cardall's Insulation.
The station for news and talk. KVNU 610 AM and 102.1 FM.
Are you in need of excellent surgical care? Budge Clinic General Surgery offers the future of surgery with state-of-the-art robotic-assisted procedures. From cancer treatments to surgical needs, they've got you covered. Call Budge Clinic General Surgery today, 435-716-1950, to schedule a consultation and experience the best possible outcome. Trust Doctors Anderson, Marshall, McKenna, and Peterson, the experts at Budge Clinic General Surgery, helping people live the healthiest lives possible.
Utah's at a crossroads. The surging economy of the last decade is not today's reality. Cache Valley is feeling the effects of rising housing costs, stagnant wages, and skyrocketing energy prices. This is not acceptable, and I know we can do better. I'm Jason Thompson, and as a successful business owner, proven job creator, and experienced city mayor, I know what it takes to ensure that Utah is heading in the right direction. But I can't do it alone. I need your vote this November. At electjasonThompson.com, learn how together we can keep Utah heading in the right direction.
Paid for by the Committee to elect Jason Thompson.
For the people, hour 2 of today's show. It is a fun coincidence we're about to get to here because we have. So I had a segment planned last night. David A. French, conservative commentator, longtime National Review writer, now retired from that position, and you see him pop up once or twice a month as a columnist at various places, but mostly the New York Times. He was well known, though, as a conservative thinker and voice from his time as a National Review fellow. And he wrote some of the, I think, most challenging thought pieces at National Review in his time there. So I had planned to run that this hour anyway, because I saw that he had spoken at BYU last night. And I reached out to a friend in the political science department there, and he was nice enough to get me some audio. And so I was planning to run that already, and I knew that we had Sutherland Institute's Defending Ideas sneak preview today. We always do that Tuesdays at 5. And but I hadn't heard yet from Nick and crew at Sutherland what their topic was. Well, it turns out they are talking this week on Defending Ideas with Representative John Curtis, who is also United States Senate candidate John Curtis. Currently, though, a representative of Utah's 3rd Congressional District. And they're talking to John Curtis about the exact same thing David French spoke on, which could be lazily described as the political circus we currently live in. And both of them talked about this from very different angles. So David A. French from a research and surveying and his experience for decades as a writer in politics, and Representative John Curtis talking about it as a Utahn, as someone who's been in politics from Provo mayor on up. But both of them talking about the same thing. And Representative John Curtis, in this week's sneak preview of Sutherland Institute's Defending Ideas, says he has a proposed solution, though not many details. He says, national politics especially, we need a great big reset. Here is a sneak preview of this week's episode of Sutherland Institute's Defending Ideas.
Recently, and the theme I thought was really fascinating, because you kind of had this idea of, well, let's rethink our politics. Let's, I think you used the term reinvent the wheel, but try a square. To me, it kind of screamed reset. We need to change some things in a positive way. Can you just elaborate on that theme a little bit?
Yeah, it is a reset, but I also wanted to highlight that we needed to see things differently. That's why let's reinvent the wheel, but this time try a square. Because nobody would suggest that's a good idea. But a lot of our good ideas come from things that originally sounded like a really bad idea. And I'm challenging people to just view things a little bit differently and be willing to try some things that may not sound off the top of the head like it's going to work.
Did this come from a place of there obviously is something wrong in our national political discourse? There's too much contempt and anger and polarization. Did it what motivated you to say, we need to see things a little differently because what we're doing maybe isn't always working? Yeah, and there's that. I will also say it's kind of an internal thing with me and my team that we're committed to be different. And sometimes that's hard. People don't like to see different. It's uncomfortable. But there's a real commitment on our part to look at things differently and try things differently. I want to tease out one example. So it's at our Congressional Series event. We'll link to the video in our show notes if anyone wants to go back and rewatch that.
It's quite a highlight. I would have them watch the whole thing. It was amazing.
Yeah, I mean, and thanks to you, of course, for the participation. Our congressional delegation is always great to have and interact with voters, and especially a lot of students up at the U and our partnership with Hinckley Institute. But you mentioned a specific example of this that I want to kind of talk about in terms of elected officials communicating with constituents. Sometimes I think voters can feel some angst there. It's easy to throw up your hands and say, well, nobody listens to me. I can't really make a difference at the federal level. It's easy to feel really jaded about politics. But you told a story of changing how you did town halls. And that sounds like kind of just a logistical thing. But I think it speaks to this broader point of improving our dialogue, and voter to elected officials, one of those most important relationships. So can you tell that story? And then I want to talk about what was the impact of it.
So for decades, a town hall has been very traditional. I stand before 100 people. They fire questions at me. I give my answers back. And it's good, but it can be better. And usually what happens is 1 or 2 or 3 people kind of dominate the dialogue, and you get a lot of people that come and never got a chance to answer their question, or we spend a half hour on somebody's issue that's not everybody's issue. And I'm always frustrated because if there's 100 people, there's 50 hands up in the air. How do I know who to call on and whose turn it is? And I found all that very frustrating. I came back one day and announced to my team, I'm not going to do these ever again. And I caught them off guard a little bit, but I wanted to force the square answer, right? Like, let's look at this differently. And so I said, hey, look, I'm not going to take questions anymore. Well, that sounds like a square will, right? Like, how can you do a town hall and not take questions? And by the way, we're never going to call it town halls again. We call them community outreach meetings, because I wanted to demonstrate to my team that we're not going to do this anymore. So the format that we came up with is I'll speak for about 15 minutes about what I'm working on in Washington, because I want to share that. People want to hear that. And then we break up into groups, and I bring my whole team with me. So we have passport experts, we have visa experts, we have VA experts, and every kind of issue that my constituents have, we bring an expert for that. If you want to suggest legislation, we have somebody. And they spread around the room with tables, and people can go visit those tables. And then I take 5-minute meetings with people for 90 minutes. So for 90 minutes, I take people 5 minutes at a time, and they can say to me anything they want. They can ask me anything they want, and they find it remarkably refreshing compared to that fighting with everybody else to get a little slice of my time. And I ask them inevitably, I always say, do you like this better? And I've never had anybody say, no, they've clearly said this is better. And I think that's just a really good example of, if you had just said, boy, you're going to do a town hall and not take questions, that will never work.
And there's something you're touching on that I want to expand on a little bit, and it reminds me of in some previous roles I worked in local government at the Salt Lake County level, and on occasion I would have people call in and complain about something, various constituents that we interacted with. The thing that I noticed was if I just sort of let them vent for a while and try to answer their questions and ask some clarifying questions, even at the end of the conversation, if it wasn't a problem that we could solve, or maybe even if we disagreed with the approach they were suggesting, most of the time, their anger kind of went away because they just wanted to feel heard.
Yeah, so imagine one-on-one looking me in the eye for 5 minutes and telling me your frustration. You're exactly right. A lot of people, they didn't really come to ask me a question. They came to tell me how they feel about something. And I don't know the numbers, but I'll bet at least half don't have a question, but they want to tell me something.
And it seems like that, I feel like that creates sort of the framework for the broader theme in our politics. That is, as you mentioned, when you go to town halls and there are some who want to make a lot of noise and maybe are frustrating for the other participants, do you think that's almost a microcosm of our broader politics, that most people just want to make sure their elected officials are hearing and understanding their concerns? And maybe there's a minority of folks who really are looking for a platform to perform. This kind of ties back to a lot of the work of Yuval Levin from American Enterprise Institute, his work on institutions, that our society, our culture today is so performative rather than formative. And so I wonder if you have seen this sort of new town hall model better serve the needs of constituents who just want to feel heard, and maybe not giving as much airtime to the folks who just want a platform upon which to perform. Is that a distinction that you've seen?
Black and white, yes, a clear distinction. Interestingly, I kind of know who the people are, and guess what? They don't sign up for the 5-minute interview, because that's not what they wanted. They wanted to be in front of a crowd, making a point, trying to make me look bad or trying to make their point, and it totally takes away from them what they came for when you say, not everybody else gets to hear you, only me.
Well, one of the other themes, you referenced a quote or a concept from President Ronald Reagan, that, and I'm not going to get it exactly, so you might, or our listeners may correct me on it, but essentially the principle of, if you agree with me 80% of the time, you're not my 20% enemy, you're my 80% friend. And you referenced that in your talk at our congressional series. I want to ask you to expand on that. What does that mean today? It seems to go toward the spirit of common ground. Is that principle still alive and well today, and how do you apply it?
It's on life support, and the reason it is too many of our constituents see the 20% and get very, very angry at the 20%. They don't see the 80%. And too many of my colleagues, in my opinion, it's the easy way out to blame the 20% why I won't vote for this. I can find something in every bill not to vote for, but it's a little bit harder to say, you know what, let me show you the 80% that I saw, and now let's have a thoughtful conversation about ooh, that 20% that neither you or I liked, why I was willing to deal with that. And the reality of it is sometimes I'll vote against a bill because there's 20% I don't like, but what I don't like is so strong that I can't take the 80%.
It seems to me that there's this reframe, this sort of square approach, as you've called it, and talking about this concept of the 80% rule from Ronald Reagan. What I want to ask is, this screams for sort of a renewal of, yes, robust debate and disagreement, but finding common ground where we can act together. But does it feel like people want that? Are voters hungry for that and just not being heard, or do we still need to do some work to get there?
I would say that what I'm proposing is a lot harder, both for the representative and for the constituent. It is so easy to just say, look, that's not going to work, and here's why, and then we're done. Well, guess what? We never solved the problem. And immigration, you can throw out problem after problem, budget, deficit, all those things that we never really solve. Well, it's easy to say, yeah, I vote against every spending bill. It's a lot harder to say, here are my fixes to get us out of this.
That was, again, Representative John Curtis, United States Senate candidate John Curtis as well, speaking with Nick Dunn of the Sutherland Institute in this week's episode of Sutherland's Defending Ideas. You can listen to the full episode at sutherlandinstitute.org. That was just a little 10-minute sneak preview, if you will, that we run here each week on Tuesdays. But put a pin in this one. Not only are we going to keep this thing going through the hour with highlights from former National Review fellow and writer David French speaking at BYU last night with some very related things to say, though I don't think they coordinated this at all. It's perfect. But I just want to talk a little bit on the other side about Representative Curtis and that how they've changed in his office, how they do town halls. That's fascinating for a lot of different reasons. We'll talk about it. And listeners, you're welcome to weigh in. We'll get back to it right after this.
News Talk 610 AM, 102.1 FM, KVNU.
Hey, get prepared for the hunting season. Did you remember to bring your hunting gear, your sleeping bags, and coats into Mount Logan Laundry? With their 55 and 80-pound washers and dryers, they can do any job. And while you're at it, bring in the comforters and blankets and get ready for the colder months ahead. Try Mount Logan Laundry. For a few quarters, you can use their large-capacity washers and dryers and be done in no time. Free Wi-Fi and drop-off service. They're at the corner of 5th East and 9th North in Logan, or in Brigham on the corner of 1st East and 7th South. Mount Logan Laundry really is the cleanest spot in town.
Fans of timeless Western music, mark your calendars for October 4th at 7:30 p.m. for the Sons of the Pioneers.
Drifting along with a tumbling tumbleweed.
Known for the rich harmonies and classic hits like Cool Water and Tumbling Tumbleweeds, the Sons of the Pioneers are returning to the Ellen Eccles Theater and bringing an evening of some of the most iconic melodies in American music history with them.
Cool water.
Get your tickets today at casharts.org.
Coming up on the Wednesday edition of the Clay Travis and Buck Sexton Show, looking at whether the Harris campaign is planning to do any additional interviews between now and Election Day. We'll take a tally of how it's going so far. Plus, Clay.
Look, it's under 6 weeks until the election. All of you need to get out and vote. We'll give you the absolute latest in the battleground states. That'll be the Wednesday edition, Clay and Buck.
10 to 1 on News Talk KVNU, 102 FM and 610 AM.
Welcome back to KVNU's For the People. If you're just tuning in, you missed it, but you can listen to the whole episode at sutherlandinstitute.org. We played this week's sneak preview of Sutherland's Defending Ideas, a weekly show they do. Nick Dunn with various guests, sometimes from Sutherland's own staff, but oftentimes special guests brought in to talk about sometimes a theme, sometimes just all over the place with public policy. It's one of the most interesting things you can listen to each week. SutherlandInstitute.org. And I'm saying this whether you agree with them or not, because I often don't. But they'll make you think. And this week was no exception. But I want to get back to this. So this week, for those just tuning in again, Nick Dunn spoke with Representative John Curtis, Utah's 3rd Congressional District, also United States Senate candidate John Curtis. You'll see his name that way on your ballot, even here in northern Utah this fall. And he talked about something they did. They were talking generally about Curtis saying, national politics needs a reset. And this is a theme we'll get to on the other side of the news with some highlights from David French, a former National Review fellow and writer for decades, well known in the conservative world. He spoke at BYU last night on the same topic, basically. Uncoordinated, unplanned, but it ended up being perfect. So we've got that coming up on the other side of the news. But before we move on to that, I want to go back to this that you heard in that sneak preview of Defending Ideas this week. Representative John Curtis saying he talked to his team. He talked about how unproductive town halls have become in the last few years. And we've all been there, right? We've all been at a municipal council meeting or a candidate forum or just to show you it doesn't just happen in politics. This also happens at the Sundance Film Festival in the Q&As for the film. But there's that guy, and it's almost always a guy, who is there, and you can tell. You can spot him in advance. He's not there so much to ask a question, to get an answer from the candidate or the elected official or the politician or the filmmaker or whoever it might be in whatever forum you're in. This is the guy that's there to get attention. He's there to make a speech because he wants to be in the spotlight. And he didn't make a movie, or he isn't an elected official, or he isn't a candidate, but he still wants the attention. And he wastes everyone's time, including the candidate, the politician, the filmmaker, whatever it is. We've all seen this happen, right? I've seen it happen a million times at candidate forums. I've had the honor to be invited to moderate. And it's unfortunate because it does waste everyone's time. Curtis said he started to see this the last couple of years, especially at all of his town halls. These people that were there to get themselves on video, to get themselves in the spotlight, to make a speech, to get attention, usually someone with a podcast or you know what I mean? And we all know who I'm talking about here, right? You probably have some of these people in your family. I know I do. But I have a friend, a really close friend, who's this person, and I tease him about it all the time. But it's irritating, and it wastes everybody's time at these events that are usually, pretty tight schedule anyway. And so Curtis said he got irritated by this. And first he said, we're not doing this anymore. It's a waste of time. Nobody's learning anything from me. I'm not learning anything from my constituents. It's not a dialogue. We're not doing them. His staff said, you might want to still do them. It doesn't look good if you don't do them. Talking to you, Senator Mike Lee. But I know teletown halls, but those don't count. There's a reason they don't count, and there's a reason you do them. But Representative John Curtis said his staff talked him back into it, but they decided they're going to do it differently. And so what they did is they kind of designed they stopped calling them town halls. And he said, we did that on purpose so my staff would realize we're doing something different than a town hall, even though it's with the same goal, which is a dialogue with constituents. And he said what they did is they started setting up 2 hours of 5-minute interviews where constituents could come in, sit down one-on-one and with the staff there, of course, but sit down one-on-one with Representative John Curtis, with their own congressman, and ask whatever questions, talk about whatever they wanted for 5 minutes. That doesn't sound like a lot of time, but you could get a question or two that are burning on your mind out, and one-on-one with your with one of your federal delegates. I didn't know Curtis was doing this, and now I want every one of my federal delegates to start doing this. Instead of a big public 2-hour town hall, 2 hours of 5-minute interviews, and you let people schedule them, well in advance, 6 months in advance. I love this idea. But Curtis said what they noticed is that regulars at their town halls who had been disruptive, who had tried to get themselves in the spotlight with a speech that wasn't ever really a question, that were there to get fodder to make themselves, to get the spotlight on them, to get attention for themselves. Someone with a podcast, someone with he said what they noticed is those people who claimed to have these burning questions for Representative John Curtis, when offered a chance to sit down with him one-on-one and ask him questions and express their concerns, they didn't sign up. Obviously revealing that they're not there to positively influence things. They're there to get attention for themselves. And part of this, and social media is in part to blame, But I don't think it's just social media. And sometimes when I see people on CNN or Fox News saying, oh, it's social media, I feel like they're doing that way too eagerly to take any accountability away from themselves, because I think cable news has been a big part of this too. But it's become, the word Representative John Curtis used is performative. Town halls, for example, are for so many people are no longer about going to have a dialogue with your federal delegate, who you very rarely get to interact with, a chance to ask a question, a chance to hear them answer others' questions, a dialogue. Now it's a show. And I'll be honest with you, I recognize this because I have gone to see the show. I have gone knowing I didn't have a single question, that my question's already been answered because I'd had a chance to sit here in the studio with the candidate. But I went to see the show. This last happened when former Congressman Rob Bishop, held a town hall at the south end of the valley in his last re-election bid. I knew there were a bunch of people mad at him, and I knew they'd been organizing to make a performative production at his town hall, and I went to see for the entertainment. I didn't go to learn. This is brilliant. What a simple change on Representative John Curtis's part, but this is a genius idea. And just hearing that from this week's episode of Defending Ideas from Sutherland Institute, I a longtime defender of town halls, longtime critic of elected officials who don't hold them, and I have suddenly changed my mind. End the town halls. Instead, set up 2 hours or more, preferably, of 5-minute interviews one-on-one with your constituents. The politician or elected official will learn more. Constituents will learn more. And in an intimate setting like that, you could be very frank. No one's going to judge you or say, that's a stupid question, or say, oh, that was kind of mean to say to your elected official. No one's there to say that. That is an amazing solution to this problem. And I didn't know Representative Curtis was doing this. I hope he keeps this up if he's elected to the United States Senate this fall. So, again, full episode of Defending Ideas can be found at sutherlandinstitute.org. We're not done with this topic, though. David French, longtime conservative writer, longtime fellow at National Review, one of the most prominent conservative magazines, he spoke at BYU last night on this same topic. What he had to say, coming at it from a very different perspective, is up next after these headlines with KVNU's Bill Walter.
KBNU News is brought to you by Canyon Landscaping. A 22-year-old USU student has confessed to using a popular social media app to download child pornography. Elijah Benjamin Maddox was arrested February 13th following an investigation by the Logan City Police Department. Court records show Maddox appeared September 9th in Logan's 1st District Court. He accepted a plea deal, pleading guilty to 5 counts of aggravated sexual exploitation of a minor, a first-degree felony, and 5 counts of enticing a minor, a second-degree felony. As part of the resolution, 17 remaining charges were dismissed. According to prosecutors, Logan police received a cyber tip from Snapchat in December 2023. The messaging app claimed a user had uploaded a file that later was determined to be child sexual abuse material. Police obtained a warrant to search the Snapchat account that was registered to Maddox. They found multiple pornographic images of female children between the ages of 6 and 16 years old. Several chats were also located between Maddox and teenage individuals. The chats were sexual in nature and often about exchanging naked images. Logan police contacted Utah State University police, who confirmed there was an Elijah Maddox attending the school. Officers arrested the suspect as he was exiting his apartment. The judge in the case of a man accused of driving high and killing 2 young boys with a car in Eagle Mountain said in a hearing Monday that a new judge will have to take over the case following a state Supreme Court decision allowing the lead defense attorney to leave the case. Joseph Aldana has asked to be allowed to leave the defense of Kent Cody Barlow after his own father passed away. Judge Robert Lund denied that request, but September 13th, the state Supreme Court overruled the judge, allowing Aldana to step down. Although the state Supreme Court said their decision should not necessitate the need to delay the trial, Judge Lund said in the hearing Monday that the defense attorney left on the case was simply not prepared to take over the trial on their own. Judge Lund said, unfortunately, exactly what he was hoping to avoid happened. The judge is retiring from the bench at the end of 2024, and he told the families of victims assembled in court that with the time needed for a new attorney to prepare for the case, it was simply impossible to have the trial completed before the end of the year. That means a new judge will have to take over the case, and this new judge will have to schedule when a trial could possibly occur in 2025. KBNU weather brought to you by Triton Medical Supply and Transportation, a partner for your medical needs with top quality medical soft goods like incontinence supplies and oxygen needs. Call 435-557-6687 or go to mytritonsupply.com. KBNU weather mostly clear tonight, low in the low 50s, and then sunny, warm around 85 on Wednesday. Get more news at CashValleyDaily.com.
ABC News, I'm Daria Aldinger. President Biden challenging his successors to do as much to prevent climate change as his administration has.
Private companies in the United States and globally have announced investments of nearly $1 trillion in clean energy manufacturing here in America in the last 3 years.
The president speaking to the Bloomberg Global Business Forum in observance of Climate Week. The House of Representatives has approved the Stop Campus Hazing Act a day earlier than expected. Tomorrow, the House is set to vote on a stopgap funding measure to avert a government shutdown at midnight Friday. Federal prosecutors have formally charged Ryan Ruth with attempting to assassinate former President Trump and other charges. The case was assigned to Judge Eileen Cannon, who threw out the classified documents case against Mr. Trump. Tropical storm Helene is expected to be a major hurricane by the time it reaches Florida's Big Bend area late Thursday evening. This is ABC News.
Fall is the perfect time to landscape, and Canyon Landscaping is ready to build or transform your outdoor space. They bring your vision to life with expert care, including installing beautiful planting beds and crafting custom paver patios. They handle your entire project from start to finish, and they have the team to get the design just right. But hurry, spots are filling up fast. Visit canyonlandscaping.com or call 752-3838 today. Let's make your outdoor space a true extension of your home. Call Canyon Landscaping. Look for the leaf.
Hello, this is Dr. Michael Clegg from Alpine Orthopedics. We're honored to be named the silver winner for doctor in the 2024 Best of Northern Utah. Thank you for believing in us.
Whether you're a farmer working the fields, a homeowner tackling weekend projects, or a contractor building the next big thing, you need a Kubota machine that works as hard as you do. And Cash Equipment is home to all your Kubota equipment service and parts needs. From plowing fields and clearing land to digging trenches and moving material. Come see why Cash Equipment and Kubota are the choice of champions on the farm, at home, and on the job site. Cash Equipment in Hyde Park and online at cashequipment.com.
Fall is upon us and the leaves are changing colors. That means it's time to hit the canyons in style and pack up the whole family for a drive. And go see all the sights in the comfort and safety of a new Murdoch Volkswagen. Right now, receive 0% for 5 years or $2,000 customer bonus on a new 2024 Tiguan. When you walk through our doors, you feel like family at Murdoch Volkswagen in Logan or online at murdochvw.com.
Call 888-391-6083 or see dealer for complete details. Offer expires 9/30/24.
I was born and raised here. I love this state. It seems right here. The trees are the right height.
Welcome back to KVNU's For the People. I'm pretty excited about this. I love when things accidentally come together like this. And it happens a lot more than you'd think in radio. I had this next segment planned as soon as I heard his remarks last night at BYU. David A. French is how he's known. David French was a long time, decades-long writer and fellow at National Review, one of the most prominent conservative magazines for conservative thought and news. And he retired from that position, and now he writes columns. You can see his column, I think, once or twice a month in the New York Times and the Chicago Tribune. Still writing from the same point of view. He's still a conservative thinker, but he's slowed down a lot so to enjoy retirement, he said. But he came to BYU last night. This was part of a speaker series for students from the Institute of, I forget what they actually call it, but it's basically the BYU version of the Institute of Government and Politics at USU. And I reached out to a friend in the political science department there who happened to record it, and he sent me some audio. And there was one specific segment that I planned to play today. What I didn't plan today was for this to be preceded by a similar discussion with Representative John Curtis as part of this week's Sutherland Institute's Defending Ideas sneak preview. We run these every Tuesday at 5 o'clock in hour 2, and Sutherland Institute sends us a portion of the episode of Defending Ideas. They're usually about an hour long. They send us about 10 minutes for our listeners to get a little sneak peek, entice you into listening to the whole thing, which I highly recommend, especially this week's. If you're just tuning in, Representative John Curtis talked about political polarization. He talked about holding these town halls and how these people would show up. And it was always, roughly the same people. He said, so often I kind of got to know them a little bit. And they weren't there to ask a question or have a dialogue with Curtis or to ask questions that helped inform everyone else in the audience, especially in an election year trying to decide how to vote. He said these were people who showed up wanting the spotlight on them. They came to make a speech. They came to make drama. They came to get attention. Sometimes they were people who had a podcast and were doing it for that reason. Other times, he said, it was just people who wanted to do that. I mentioned this doesn't only happen in politics. My go-to example for this type of thing is the Sundance Film Festival. Many films, they have a Q&A at the end, and there is always that guy, and it's almost always a guy, I'm sure that's not unrelated, who will stand up, and he's not there to ask a question about the movie of the filmmakers on the stage during the Q&A. He's there to show everyone else in the room how smart he is. He's there to make a speech. And it's irritating because these are very time limited. You have 20 minutes for any question for the filmmakers. And here's this person who wants to waste 5 of it just telling you how much he knows about something no one cares about, like set lighting. And it happens. But this also happens in politics, and it happens at town halls. I've seen it at candidate forums. I moderated a debate over Common Core years ago at the invitation of Tammy Pfeiffer when she was still a school board representative for Northern Utah. And she asked me to come down and moderate. And I remember there was a person there that stood up to the microphone and tried to make a speech. And before I could do anything as moderator, the crowd shouted this person down. And I found out later because they knew this person. And the speech that he was making wasn't even related to Common Core, which is what the panel was about. It was the strangest thing I've ever seen. I'm glad the crowd handled it because I didn't know who he was. John Curtis talked about this happening in his town halls and how they shifted gears. They decided this is wasting everyone's time. So instead of having these 2-hour events where these attention seekers and content creators could waste everybody's time, they shifted to 2 hours of 5-minute interviews. And he said, what we found is the dialogue was better. I actually came away understanding my constituents' concerns better, and hopefully they came away understanding where I'm coming from better. I got to answer questions directly. We found out several ways we could help constituents. And he said that he believes these are people who wouldn't have stepped up to the microphone at a town hall. And also, ironically, the people who claim to have the most burning questions for Representative John Curtis at a town hall, they didn't bother to sign up for the 5-minute one-on-one interview because that wouldn't get them the attention they wanted. It's brilliant. And now I want everyone to do this. I'm going to be lobbying all of our elected officials to make this shift. So with that in mind, David French also talked about political polarization and the performative nature of our politics, where everyone's doing everything just to get attention these days, usually on social media. And he talked about this from a different perspective than Representative Curtis just did. He talked about it from the perspective of Pew Research that was recently done on polarization, showing this duality where Americans are not polarized on the issues. They actually agree a lot on issues, even controversial ones like abortion. There's a huge area where everyone agrees to some extent. But he said if you ask them if a person in another party than the one they subscribe to has as much value as them, then they say no, and they look more polarized. And he said that duality got him thinking. Here's what he had to say to BYU students last night.
So this is 10 years ago. The Pew Research Center had been studying American polarization, and it began to ask Americans, what do you think of people on the other side? If you're a Republican, do you strongly dislike, somewhat strongly like, somewhat like a Democrat? And if you're a Democrat, what are your feelings towards Republicans? So in 2014, this is 10 years ago, before most of these people in this room were even thinking about politics at all, 10 years ago, the answer was 82% of Republicans either strongly dislike or somewhat dislike Democrats. 82%. Now, Democrats, to their credit, were much more tolerant. Only 79% of them hated or strongly disliked Republicans. And so has it gotten better or worse since 2014? It is substantially worse. It is substantially worse. If you ask a partisan Republican what they think of a Democrat, you're going to get a number in the mid to high 80% that says they're bigoted, they're intolerant, they're hateful. You name the negative characteristic. And similarly, if you ask Democrats about Republicans, they'll say they're bigoted, they're intolerant, they're hateful. There's even this concept that is now called lethal mass partisanship. Lethal mass partisanship. Now, what could that possibly be? Well, there's about 20% of Americans, believe it or not, who believe that the country would be somewhat better off if a substantial portion of their fellow citizens on the opposing side just died. If they just died, our country would be better off. Now, they're not wanting to kill them. They just think, well, if mass bus strikes, if people are hit by buses at a mass scale, it'd be fine, it'd be fine. Now, you might be a sort of a glass half full kind of person, and you say, well, the good news here is 80% of Americans don't actually want their neighbors to die. That is a good news element. But 20% of American adults is around 45, 50 million people. And do you think that the people who hate the other side the most are the least inclined to be involved in politics? No, the people who are burning with hatred right now and burning with this ferocious partisan animosity are among the people the most likely to be involved in politics. Most likely. And so you're getting some of the angriest people in America who are disproportionately drawn to politics, and their energy is being fueled by animosity. Now, it's not everybody. I know it's not everybody. I know you have politicians in the state, people I've known and got to know who I appreciate, who are offering alternative visions. So I'm not describing something that is all politicians, but I am describing something that is characteristic of our politics. And so one of the questions is, why? Why do we hate each other so much? And the answer lies in some complicated social phenomenon that are just pulling us apart, just shredding us, pulling us apart. And one of them is called the big sort. If you've never heard of this before, this is a super important concept. And what it means is, beginning several decades ago, it became apparent that Americans were wanting to move and live around people of like mind. So I come from Tennessee, outside of Nashville, a very, very conservative part of the United States. And a lot of people move to Tennessee to be around more conservative people, making my neighborhood even more conservative. Then you have other parts of the country that are every bit as liberal as my part of Tennessee is conservative, and people move there. Now, this is completely normal stuff. It's actually very understandable why you would want to do this. It's easier, right, to live around people that share your values. It's nice. You don't have to feel like you're constantly countercultural. But there's a negative effect of this. And it's, if you remember nothing that I say today, like nothing, remember this concept, because it explains so much of the United States of America. And it's called the law of group polarization. The law of group polarization. And what this means is that when people of like mind gather, they tend to become more extreme. So in other words, when you gather together with people who agree with you on something, then you tend to, as an entire group, become more extreme than sometimes the most extreme individual was at the start of the meeting. This is something that's just human nature. Think of it like this. If 6 of you support gun rights, or if 6 of you are opposed to gun rights, and you get together and it's just you, there's no dissenters, there's no disagreement around the table, you're going to leave that meeting more convicted and more committed to your position. This is just a human thing. But now let's scale that up. It used to be that American politics, you were kind of in a bell curve where most people were in the middle. Now we're flattening that. The big sword is flattening that to where you have sometimes as many, by some measures, as many people on the extremes as you have in the middle. That has a huge dynamic on our politics. And then here's this other thing that is happening. As we become walled off from each other, with the growth of screens, with the growth, going back before phones to television, we began to disassociate from each other. We began to lose connection. So at the same time we're sorting ideologically, another thing is happening called bowling alone. This is a concept from a guy named Robert Putnam who wrote this book 25 years ago, and he said, we're just not doing anything together anymore. We're not a part of civic associations. We're not part of churches. Church attendance is declining. We don't play in sports leagues. We don't do in bowling leagues. Although as a veteran of the, and I use that word advisedly, of the Nashville, Tennessee Church Softball League, I will tell you that I don't think that's bringing us together. That's trying to reinstitute the wars of religion right there.
That was, again, David French speaking to BYU students last night on polarization and political sorting, as he calls it. He doesn't go there in his remarks, which, by the way, you can watch the entire thing at byutv.org. That clip was graciously sent along by a professor in political science that I know there that recorded the event from the board, and he was able to send me that clip. This is so brilliantly expressed. French is not talking about anything new here. Political scientists have been grappling with this for decades now. Solutions, he admits, are a longer conversation. He said, I'm here tonight to kind of describe the problem so that we all start thinking about this and come up with solutions. But he defines it very simply there. Political sorting, which you can sort of blame the parties for as well, both the two major parties here in the United States, Democrat and Republican parties. The Democratic Party has every reason to encourage their base to be more dedicated to the Democratic Party and if it takes extremism, that's what they'll do. We've definitely seen that with the Republican Party in the last couple of years. If it takes extremism to get your base to pledge to never leave or donate to other candidates, we'll go with the extremism. You have both parties doing this. And as French says, anytime you get like-minded people together in large groups for long enough, the extremism is amplified. Political scientists have argued for a few years now that the parties need to go to fix this. But my question has always been, okay, what then? I don't know. Give it a watch. The entire thing is worth your time. David French, longtime National Review fellow, conservative magazine, and now columnist for the New York Times, speaking at BYU last night on polarization and social sorting, he says is, well, destroying the country. We'll be back right after this.
Intermountain Budge ENT Clinic has an experienced and caring team of physicians and staff to assist you with all of your ear, nose, and throat concerns, including head and neck surgery. Doctors Kaiser and Wilson and their staff at Intermountain Budge ENT Clinic will work together to provide excellent care and support throughout the entire surgery process, from your pre-op visit to your full recovery. And they accept all insurance. For more information about Doctors Kaiser or Wilson, search Budge Clinic ENT or call 435-716-1420. Local care with Intermountain expertise.
Make plans to attend the 3rd Annual Northern Utah Manufacturing Excellence Conference on Wednesday, October 9th. Collaborate with manufacturing leaders and resource experts. Enjoy lunch and a keynote from Paul Nelson, who leads engineering digital transformation for the space system sector at Northrop Grumman. When we strengthen Utah manufacturing, we strengthen Utah's economy. Register today for the annual New Me Conference on October 9th from 8 to 1 at the Cache County Event Center at cashchamber.com. That's cashchamber.com.
Hi, I'm Danica Patrick. Watching my nieces grow, play, and learn is amazing, but not every child gets to be carefree. 1 in 6 kids in the U.S. are hungry. This breaks my heart, and it's something that Feeding America is working to change. Each year, the Feeding America network of food banks rescues billions of pounds of good food that would have gone to waste and gives it to families in need. To help, visit feedingamerica.org.
Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Kind of hot in these rhinos.
Welcome back to KVNU's For the People. Wrapping up today's show with a more lighthearted news story to send you on your way. Now, this could have been a tragic situation, and the only reason we can talk about it and joke about it is that it was not. No one was harmed, not even one of the bulls. But what makes the story kind of funny, 8 bulls escaped Sunday from a rodeo in Massachusetts. And 8 bulls, right? They were spotted in the parking lot, and the North Attleboro Fire Department was called. Animal control officials were brought in. Highway Patrol was brought in, and more. And today, Tuesday, they finally caught the last one. So these 8 bulls had free roam of Massachusetts for a little over 48 hours. 36 hours. I don't know why I think this is funny. The photos that have been going around on social media, though, are hilarious. Bulls standing in people's front yards, gnawing on the grass. One woman called the police because the bull was standing in her backyard and she didn't dare let her dog out. They captured them slowly, one by one, but these 8 bulls managed to terrorize this small town in New England for a couple of days after escaping. One, by the way, was caught running what first was from and then into a Walmart. Check it out. Video and photos from the community on our Facebook page.